8th of the editions of Stepping Into Ourselves, a gathering of priestesses. And this evening we have with us Shauna Ora Knight. Shauna Ora. Somehow that doesn't, it's hard for me to say. She's an artist, a writer, leader, event organizer, and environmental activist, and ecstatic spiritual speaker. She travels nationally, offering intensive education in the transformative arts of ritual, community, leadership, and spiritual growth. She's also an author of ritual facilitation book, Spiritual Sense and the Paranormal Romance, Werewolves in the Kitchen, as well as a columnist on ritual techniques for Circle magazine. Her writing will appear in several forthcoming publications on spiritual seeking, urban fantasy, and paranormal romance. She also says that she's going to get 2 more books done this summer. So she's obviously an underachiever. You're right. You fit right in with the rest of our audience, rest of our attendees. And joining us by, at this point, phone is Chandra Alexandre, who is filling in for Normandy Ellis. If you were expecting to find Normandy here, Normandy is actually on the dais as a minister this evening and will not be able to be with us. We'll reschedule her for later in the show. Chandra is a Tantric Bhairavi, I don't know how to say that, an initiator in the tradition of Kali, serving as SHARANYA, a goddess temple dedicated to social justice through personal transformation, as founding director and clergy. She's a regular pilgrim to the birthplace of Tantra, northeastern India, where she studies and practices with her teachers. She was first initiated into the mysteries of the dark goddess in 1998 in Puri, Orissa, on the okay. Chandra, you're just going to have to say these words for me because I don't know how to say them. I grew up in the South. We aren't taught how to say these words. And 5 years later, she accepted the non-dualistic path of vamacara Tantra outside of Guwahati in Assam. Her maternal grandmother was her first guide into the ways of the spirit world. She holds a PhD in Asian and Comparative Studies at the California Institute of Integral Studies and a Doctor of Ministry degree from Wisdom University. As well as an MBA in Sustainable Management from Presidio Graduate School. She makes San Francisco her home. I'm not sure where Shauna makes her home these days. I think she's more of a traveler than anything else. You were living in Chicago, right?
Right now, I'm just north of Milwaukee, out in the boonies, but usually I'm in Chicago. That's usually where I am.
Okay, all right. I knew that there was some wandering around going on there. And I'm in Oceanside, California. I'm Gloria Taylor Brown, and I'm your hostess and your interviewer for these events. And if you have any questions, I hope you'll put them into the question box because I'd be happy to ask them. We can also have, if we have time, we'll have a question and answer program at the end. I have a poll I would love for you to answer the questions as to, oops, no, I don't want that to do it. Go away.
There was that theory that technology was supposed to make our lives easier.
It's a lie. Absolutely a lie. Well, we've had few more that have. Okay. So now how do I get rid of this thing? Close poll. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to get rid of that thing and go back to where I was. Now I have to get this thing back here. One of these days I'm going to get this whole thing worked out. I only record it twice, you see. I record it with Camtasia and with Hangout so that it's immediately available after we get done here. And then Camtasia does a better job. But anyway, that's for the tech heads out there that care. So we are here in celebration of the book, Stepping Into Ourselves, an anthology of writings on priestesses. And both of the ladies who are with us this evening are authors, as well as myself. This is by Goddess Inc. And for those of you who do not have a copy, as listeners of this program, you get a 15% discount if you go to goddessinc.com. It's goddess-inc.com, and put in the bonus code SUMMER 2014 as your bonus code. You'll get a 15% discount. So I want to thank you all for being here this evening, and I'd like to thank you ladies, Shauna and Chandra. And Chandra, are you still with us? Just checking.
I am still with you, yes.
Okay, great. All right, so the first question we always ask on these shows is, what made you choose the path of a priestess? Or did you choose the path of a priestess? You can honestly say, you know, I'm not a priestess and I just happened to wander into your book unannounced. But Shauna, why don't you start? What made you choose? I mean, you obviously are wandering around to these different pagan festivals and doing initiations and rituals. I would say you're probably a priestess. What made you choose that?
Well, so I definitely resonate with the I didn't choose this path, it kind of found me, and I also resonate with the place where I chose it, because it's kind of been a bit of both. You know, when I grew up, my parents were, Shauna Ora is actually my first and middle name. My parents are total hippies, and so I mean, I was definitely raised into the woo-woo. They pretty much relate. If you want a religion, you go find it. And so, you know, I definitely didn't have that mainstream religious kind of upbringing. And so when I started learning about pagans and, you know, even just reading fantasy novels where they would have priestesses, you know, the idea of a female, the clergy could be female, was not foreign to me. What I didn't know until I got older was that there was actually a role within the community for people in that role of spiritual service, spiritual leadership. Like I was having, even as a teenager, I was having these. Well, I do a lot of dream work, and I was having these huge, epic dreams where I was, you know, I was a priestess serving in a temple or serving a community, or, you know, doing things like that. And it made sense in my head, because I read a lot of fantasy novels, but it didn't occur to me that was a role that was actually needed at all out in the world. And so, I mean, I started out pretty solitary, and then it was actually through doing scenery at science fiction conventions. I was doing some Star Wars reproduction scenery with a fan club at a science fiction convention, and we did that for several years, but I planned this really elaborate scenery, and we did it, but after it, all the team members were like, dude, Shauna, that was so cool, but I never want to work that hard again. And so I realized, like, I really need to learn some leadership skills. And so at that point, there was a big synchronicity that happened. I went to a retreat, and then I went to a weekend offering teachings in the reclaiming tradition, and I found out about this place called Diana's Grove Mystery School. And Diana's Grove, it no longer exists as it was, but it was in the Ozarks of Missouri. And so I started going to retreats there, and eventually I moved there, did the whole leave my husband, move out to live in a cabin in the woods without any thing. And I did their leadership program, and I had no intention of traveling around and teaching this stuff. I just wanted to learn the leadership skills for the various projects I did. But then I discovered that I was actually kind of good at teaching. I wouldn't have expected it. I was a shy wallflower. I was terrified of public speaking, but I got better at it. And I discovered, like, I would talk to pagans who had never heard of Diana's Grove, and they were so hungry for those leadership skills and those ritual skills that I started traveling around and teaching at pagan prides, and then I started getting invited to teach at festivals, and now I have books out. And so that part wasn't initially a plan, but once I saw what a need for this there was, I really thought, okay, how can I get this out there? How can I get this information out there? Because it's you know, it's needed, and that's why books like Stepping Into Ourselves, I think, are so important, because you know, there's just people facilitating little groups out of their house, and they, you know, and they don't have access to this kind of leadership training. They don't have access to the wealth of knowledge of folks who've been doing this work, and we need it. You know, I mean, I know when I started out, I was screwing up all the time, and it's great to be able to connect with people. You know, even with the technical difficulties of this setup that we have here, it's still great to be able to connect with people who are all over the place, who are looking for that knowledge. And so that's really the for me, the role of the priestess is the role of serving community. For me, primarily as an educator.
Yeah, one of the definitions that I've heard of priestess is the one who shows up and does the work that's required of her. And so, you know, we, as a priestess, sometimes the work we do, isn't what we want to do. You know, it's like maybe taking on more than, you know, of building the Star Wars replica than you expected, or maybe it's that you have a vision of what has to be done and what needs to be done, or you have someone that's there who is needing your services, and you don't walk away. I mean, that's one of the most characteristics, I believe, of most priestesses, is that you don't walk away whenever you see someone in need or someone that needs to be counseled or cared for or whatever. You know, it's not somebody else's job. And
I often say that you know, you can usually tell who's in charge of a group by who is carefully picking the candle wax out of the carpeting at the end of the event, or washing the grungy dishes. That's usually the person who's in charge, because they're doing the work that nobody else wants to do. Right.
Yeah. So Chandra, and am I saying your name correctly?
That's right. It's Chandra. That's right.
Okay. For you, obviously, there's been a long tradition that has called you forth, starting from your grandmother and moving through the Indian tradition. So, but what was the pull that kept pulling you forward? Where was it that you found so much wealth and that you stayed there?
Sure. There's quite a bit that I could say, but let me begin with something that I think ties back to the conversation. And Shauna, thank you so much, because I resonate with so much of your story and so much of the wisdom that you're offering into this circle. You know, when I was in India in 1998, I went over doing field work for my dissertation, and there was a lot that prompted that. And if we have time, spiritual reasons, and we have time, I think maybe some of that will come out in the future conversation we'll have. But I was told, well, I'll start by saying I was there doing dissertation field work. I went to a certain part of northeastern India, and there was a political mela, an uprising that happened, and there was quite a lot of violence. I was sequestered with some staff in a hotel in one of the topmost floors. The courtyard of the hotel was set on fire. There were bricks being thrown through the windows. It was a very terrifying experience. And I came out of that, and I looked for a temple of the Divine Mother to give thanks to. And previously, I'll circle this back a little bit to my prior history, that as a practicing witch in New York, I had had a terrifying dream, a life-changing awakening dream, in which the goddess as Kali Ma came to me and stood before me in the dream, larger than life as she is, and woke me up to myself in a way that really came down to one question. And she didn't speak, but I knew. And the question was, do you want to live or do you want to die? Because the way that I had been living my life and the choices that I had been making for a variety of different reasons just weren't very good choices. And so when I went to the temple, I said, I know I need to be before her feet and give thanks to her for getting me out of this situation unscathed. And when I went to that temple, I wound up becoming a student of the pujari, or the head priest of the temple, who was both a Brahmin practitioner, sort of an orthodox formal practitioner, but also a tantric. and so profoundly devoted to the Mother Goddess Kali in the ways of the body, in the ways of the world, the ways of the earth, and our engagement with nature as a vehicle for illumination of both immanent and transcendent spirit. And so after being with him, and there's a whole story I could say, so I want to be brief. The idea is that I initiated with him, first converted to Hinduism, then initiated with him, accepted the mysteries of the Dark Goddess of Kali, and then I, upon getting ready to go back to the States, which was after 6 months in India, he said to me one thing. He said, "Go spread mother worship." That's all he said. And I meditated on that. I chewed on that for a very long time. And when I got back to the States, I knew what it meant for me. And it connected the dream that I had had much earlier to my experiences in India, to who I was and what I wanted to do as a priestess. And that was share the power of her love, the power of her grace, the power of her healing with others. And so I formed SHARANYA to be able to do that, and did that initially in 1998. So that's a big piece of my story.
Well, that's a rather dramatic opening. Obviously, there was something before that. You said you were a witch before that. So, and you also indicated that your grandmother was part of your initiation, shall we say. And I find grandmothers frequently are part of the initiation. My grandmother began me with palmistry when I was 5 years old, and she felt that I should have something to fall back on if all my plans didn't work out. So it's kind of interesting that here I am 60 years later and doing tarot readings and working with priestesses to make my living. Maybe grandmother was rather more prescient than I believed. So, yes, so as we weave this together of the different aspects of being a priestess, you two have come from different places and different ways of coming in, but in a way we've all kind of arrived not necessarily at the same place, but at a place that is satisfactory for us. And I think that that is one of the lessons that we can offer our audience, is that, you know, how this works for us in our life today, how being a priestess is in effect interwoven with whatever else we do, that it's not something that is separate and you know, we do this over here and then over here we have this separate job. You know, who I am and what I do in many ways are the same. So I would like you two to both comment on that, and you may have a completely different point of view, so there's no requirement that you have the same, but just how it works for you today in this life to be a priestess, and how that interweaves with, or doesn't interweave with, your traditional, your role as a independent woman who's making her living in the world. Shauna, would you like to go first?
Sure. Gosh, that's, I mean, there's so many thoughts in my head around that, because for me, I work to make my life totally integrated. You know, I write the nonfiction stuff. I write the leadership, you know, how to be a better pagan leader, and you know, how to be a better ritual facilitator, you know, the kind of personal growth, finding your own magic, you know, facing your shadows, all that juicy kind of stuff. And I also write fiction. I write fantasy, I write urban fantasy, I write romance, and you know, for me, I see it all as a continuum. You know, I'm also an artist, I'm a painter, I'm a graphic designer, I'm an activist, and for me, I mean, I see them all kind of overlapping. Yes, you know, it's all work that I'm doing in the world. You know, it might sound silly, but when I'm writing a romance novel, you know, there's a lot of romance tropes that I actually, you know, by a trope, what I mean is there's a lot of, you know, just common plot devices that happen in romance novels, and there's tendencies that actually really go against some of my feminist leanings, and so, I try and not write stuff like that, even though it's kind of a genre convention of romance. I actually kind of buck against that a little bit and try and write stuff that more falls into alignment with, like there's a big upswelling in the consent, yes is yes movement, that, the consent-focused movement. And so I try and work stuff like that kind of subtly into things like that. So it's just, that might sound like a silly example, but, as an environmental activist, I try and live my everyday, for me, environmental activism is not, I'm not out on the streets with a protest sign. I've done that before, but I don't find that to be the most effective use of my time. I'm living my everyday trying to reduce my use, and for me that is my spirituality. My spirituality is using less, reducing the harmful substances that I use, the toxic cleaners, and reducing my use of plastic, and reducing my use of anything that's largely manufactured. And just for me, it's every day trying to find a way to reduce my impact. And for me, that's spirituality. For me, social justice is spirituality. When someone makes a racist comment and I actually call them on it, that is part of my spirituality. So there's for me, it's all a continuum of the same thing. I could go on about how it is. We could talk forever about that there's a whole, like, making money as a priestess, and that they're trying to make a living off of that work, and that's probably a whole separate conversation, because that's actually been one of my challenges, and I know it's a big challenge for a lot of people who are trying to do this work, is you want to devote your whole life to doing this work. If it calls to you that strongly, that I know that's what I want to do. But unfortunately, it's for a lot of us, if not most of us, it's not easy to do that. So we have to find other ways that are still in alignment, or at least to try to be in alignment with what we're trying to do spiritually, where we can actually make enough to get by. And so that's a balance. That's actually a challenge that I face, is that latter part. But yeah, for me, everything that I do is on that continuum. It's all part of my spiritual focus.
Thank you. And Chandra, so how would you, you obviously are making your living as a priestess, or it looks that way from what it says in your biography. What is your comment about how you integrate being a priestess with living your life as a modern day woman in the 21st century, and representing in many ways some very, very old traditions?
Yeah, it's a very powerful question, and I would give the first seed, as Shauna has articulated as well, as social justice, that who I am as a woman, how I stand as a priestess, the walk that I walk, the talk that I talk, all of that comes from a heart place, a motivated place, a deeply connected to spirit place, of wanting the world to be other than it is right now, and knowing that the injustice is prevalent to different degrees for different reasons across the globe. And that looks like so many different manifestations depending on where we are and what we're talking about. But the core of it for me is that personal transformation, and the leading of personal transformation as a priestess is what is going to effectuate change. So I too have been an on-the-street activist, at the Capitol with my signs and all of that. And I think that was a really important part of really owning my rage and figuring out how to be, through that, a productive citizen, a productive part of the world that I wanted to change, and do it from a place of wanting to heal and wanting to bring something, let's say, positive as a shorthand, into the world, and to give that back. And as I found it in myself, of course, and through that capacity within myself, I then had a lot much to offer and a lot more to give. And so while I could say that, yes, I make my living as a priestess, because from that standpoint, priestessing is integrated into everything I do, I do have two full-time jobs. I do run SHARANYA as a spiritual community, and have devoted a tremendous amount of time and energy and effort to that. And I also work in the nonprofit sector as an advocate for educational equity. And so I do a tremendous amount of work on a day-to-day basis in a profession that, for me, again, is about priestessing and bringing my priestessing skills into meetings and facilitation and strategic direction for an organization that's on the national landscape looking to do good in the world, and how can they possibly do that better. And I will say, though, also, not though, but also, it may be that I have 3 full-time jobs, because in the tradition where I come from, it's very, very rare to see women who have children, who have positions of leadership, authority, and initiating capacity being out in public about their roles. And I do have a daughter. And so, in fact, when I was in India and I was pregnant with my daughter, my friends and my family, my spiritual family there, would look at me and say, "So what are you going to do?" You know, essentially meaning or saying to me that I had to give something up. You can't do both. You know, pursuing your my daughter's here too. Pursuing your spiritual path or having a family. And so I often say that I'm a householder, which has different connotations in India than it does here. But in terms of my path and my progress, I am a priestess and a householder, which means that I own both of those worlds. So again, very much as Shauna has articulated, it's about a seamlessness and creating an incredible thread throughout one's life of owning one's power in order to help, I would say, empower others.
It's a good answer. They're all good answers. And the reason I ask it is because I was asked that question by one of the people who is going to be listening to this later. She was really struggling with the fact that she has very much of a day job, and it does not feel very congruent with her priestessing and being a priestess, or even being a worshiper of whatever it is she worships, you know, whether it's the goddess or Kali or the Christian belief system, whatever it is, it still is not congruent for her. And I think that there's a lot of women that have that problem, that, you know, we get up, we put on a mask, we put on armor, we walk out the door, and we become someone else. We become the, who was it? One woman has referred to it as the briefcase warrior, and, you know, the corporate person. And
yeah, can I respond to that?
Sure.
Yeah, I just have a couple of thoughts. You know, I did too. I was that as well. I used to be an investment banker, so there you go. So we make choices. We come to crossroads. You know, for me, again, my alignment around social justice manifested in switching careers. I left the for-profit and went to the nonprofit sector and found something my heart could be passionate about. Certainly not everyone can do that. But the other thing that I had started doing that I think made that transition much more feasible was that I stopped being the briefcase warrior. I started refusing to have that own me and be shackled by the agenda of the corporation, to put it frankly. I started to become, not, you know, at the same time maintaining a respectfulness to my employer. I started to allow myself the freedom, or own the space of occupying the freedom of who I truly was. And that's a very personal position of courage and power, and willing to, again, claim that space for oneself. And I think we have to be willing to grow into that. And that would just be a suggestion that I would have. And that's certainly something that helped me to make the leap into the unknown at the time for me in 2001, of going from, you know, the corporate sector and a good-paying job to the absolute unknown in a sector that certainly did pay as well, but that I was deeply passionate about, again, through that social justice thread.
You know, thank you for that. And Shauna, did you have any comments?
I mean, you know, it sounds like Chandra and I both come from, you know, we've had that, I can resonate with the briefcase warrior. You know, I was a graphic design, web design consultant for many years, and working the 70-hour week and all that. And, you know, and I gave all that up to go move into a cabin in the woods and pee in a bucket, basically, putting it right out there, and I was happier. But what I will say is that there are a lot of folks out there. There are certainly a lot of folks out there that would like to follow a spiritual calling in all that they're doing, and they are not in a position of financial privilege where they can do that. They like if you live in the area where I live, if you don't have a certain amount of education and a certain amount of access, if you can't afford a car, you get the job that you can get. There's a lot of folks who, and I would guess that the person that messaged you, Gloria, with this, probably feels constrained, in her life, and by this, it sounds like she's got that tension, and there's a lot of folks, and the economy is such where some folks, the job that you have is the only job you're going to be able to get at this time, and that's, I know a lot of people in that position. I know a lot of people that send out resumes every day and can't get a job. What I will say is that if you're in a job that is bumping up against your ethics and your values, for instance, if you find yourself working for a big box retailer, or you find yourself you're working for a corporation, maybe you're working in a warehouse or a factory that's producing things that are harmful to the planet. You're working at Walmart, and that Walmart buys things from overseas and slave labor. Whatever is going on, where if there's something where you're working for a company that doesn't align with your ethics and your values. Just notice that that's going to be a struggle, and a lot of us face that. What I will say though is that the work you do every day can still be part of your spirituality. Here's an example. When I get onto a bus in Chicago, I thank the bus driver. When I am in line at a grocery store and I go to the cashier, I thank the cashier, because I know that bus driver and that cashier are having a crappy day. Because people are mean. Let's just face it. People are mean to them every day, and they shout at them, and they don't need that. Well, look at yourself in the opposite end of that position. You're the cashier. You are the bus driver. You are the person working in the factory. You are the person working in the big box store. Every day, you have an opportunity to make the people's lives around you better. So even if you're not able to live your values around, maybe you're working for a company and you don't believe in what they're doing, and that their CEOs are taking a lot of money, you can still work to make things better for even just the customers you interact with and the people around you. And I know, maybe that sounds a little fruity, but I have to believe that if we try and make people's lives better, that really spreads out. I think about it this way. I've been in line at a cashier where someone was just yelling at that cashier, and the cashier was obviously new and trying to figure out the register. And not only does that person make that cashier's day horrible, but then that cashier is in a bad mood for the rest of the day, and that negativity just spreads out. Well, what if we did the opposite? What if something was going wrong and we said, hey, just take your time. It's all right. It's okay. Imagine how that changes things. And so I just look at it as being a priestess to people, to service, kindness, and try and bring that across. And so there's all sorts of different ways in your life that you can bring across your spiritual values. Even if you're not working for a job where you feel like you're able to do that, you might find that there's really some surprising little ways that you can. And maybe you work at that job long enough that you have some influence. I know people that have worked for big corporations that were able to get a recycling program in at their company. So you never know when you're going to be able to do something that helps you live your values, your spiritual values, in an organization like that.
Yeah. Susan says, "Thank you, Shauna. I do that." So she's one that said, "Gloria, you're describing my life." So, Chandra, you have created this community that I realize, as the leader of the community, that gives you one very distinct role. But the community itself has outreach into the greater community, and it has the ability to change things through the way it exists, I guess I would say. I say that I used to be part of the, and still am part of, but not actively, the Women of Wisdom Foundation in Seattle, Washington. And even though we were not, we were not instrumental in a regular basis, we still could affect the community in which we lived. And we had so many members that we were able to make a difference and to make a difference in people's lives. So I know that that exists. So I would like to hear something from Chandra about how her community exists in the greater community.
Sure, that's a wonderful question. Well, SHARANYA exists, as I said earlier, first and foremost as a spiritual family of practitioners who are absolutely committed to personal growth and transformation, and who recognize that their bodies are intimately connected to other bodies, are intimately connected to Earth, and are intimately connected to the divine. And so a lot of the work and the time that we spend is in deepening our understanding of those connections. So therefore, in response to your question, and related in fact to the other question of sort of how do we show up in the world doing what we're doing as priestesses, as spiritual seekers, as devotees of the divine, that a lot of what we do in SHARANYA is strengthen ourselves to be able to do that work, knowing that we do have the supportive community. So a lot of the choices, and what we talk about in community, in fact, as part of the structured sort of program of commitment, is that everyone does choose a specific project that they'll work on, something that is in alignment with ecofeminist values, with values that relate the bodies of women to Earth, to the Divine Mother. We figure out the ways in which we individually seek to make those changes. So not only do we live them and have practices largely following the Yoga Sutras that take us from the external, as Shauna was talking about, the how you behave in the world, the how you think in the world, to the much more psycho-spiritual inner processes of learning about our own inner landscape in order to be increasingly self-aware. And as those two strengthen, we can do better work, more sustained work out in our communities. So again, each one of us has a certain particular alignment, a project, a calling that we follow, and the community supports every member through mentorship, through sitting in circle with one another in order to be able to get them to where they need to be, answer tough questions, help with challenges, mentoring, all of that kind of work. But I think that the community as a whole does, of course, fit within, we're in San Francisco physically, we sit within the Bay Area community, a very interesting, robust, spiritually diverse community. And a lot of the work that we've been doing over the past few years has really been focused on interfaith alliances and how to bring together politics, social action, and the commitment to the divine that we can have conversations about. So working with the Hindu diaspora, working with interfaith communities that are already established, working with the World Forum of Religions, working with different organizations that have that disposition already, and then we can fit in on both a personal level and we can fit in as a community. Because in part we are international, certainly we have our offices in San Francisco, we do a lot of our work here, we have online programs, and so we get people from all over, but we also have a spiritual home in Puri in Orissa in India in the Northeast, and so helping to bridge those divides and translate cross-cultural differences and facilitate awareness is all part and parcel of the work that we do.
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking of as you were talking about that is I had an experience right after 9/11 of being called to a conference in New York City by Reverend Sun Myung Moon, who I'm not particularly in alignment with his views, but he not only paid for our travel, but paid for our hotel and paid for our food to attend a peace conference in New York City right after 9/11. And we were there with people who were dedicated fundamentalist Christians, Muslims, Jewish, everything else. And there was I mean, between them all, and as far as I could tell, I was the only goddess representative there. But among them all, there was an understanding that at our hearts, what we wanted was peace. What we wanted was we wanted to work together with one another, and it was very transformative for me because I think there had been some us versus them attitude in my community prior to that. That well, we don't want to try and bring in any anybody who's Christian, because of course they're not going to understand what we're talking about, or anybody who's Muslim or anything else. And we were able to broaden out our reach and to actually bring in teachers who spoke to those communities and didn't have a loss in our other community. So it was an expansion that occurred from that. I still don't agree with most of his principles and don't want to get married to somebody I never met before, but, did that once. Creating community, creating it's going back to this idea of creating a container for living your life. That the container for living your life may be that of being a priestess. It may be that you express that by being a person that stands at the door of Walmart and welcomes people into the store. But you can be a person who does that in such a way that you are open-hearted and honest and understanding that this is, these are individuals that shop there because that's what they can afford to shop. One of the things that I know is we can transform the community around us by the way we live our lives. We are not, one of the things I've learned a long time ago is we're rarely in control of anybody else besides ourselves. We can be present, and we can recognize that others are present as well. So, and I wanted to talk about, because both of you have this ritualist program. I mean, Shauna has taught people how to be leaders and ritualists. Chandra has obviously embodied it. I want you both to talk about the idea of, and I know, I see that Andrea Goodman is on the line, as well as I think Rachel was on here earlier, and so several other people who are, looking at creating their own communities. So I would like you to talk about, the idea of creating your own community or stepping into that role of leadership. And let's go Chandra first this time.
I think you need to Shauna because I just spoke.
No, I didn't. I said let's go to Chandra first this time.
Okay, sure, not a problem. I'll just sort of relate a little bit of my story. So after I was given that instruction and thought a lot about it, go spread mother worship. What does that mean to me? What did I want to do with that? How would I want to own that? And I decided that creating community in order to help spread what I had learned and share, sort of the wisdom of growing community with others in co-creation was really important. I think, oh, you know what? I think you might be able to see me soon.
Oh, goody.
I think so. I think it might work. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Well, I think it should work in a minute.
All right. Well, Shauna, why don't you go ahead and start talking and let her see if she can get her webcam to work.
That sounds good. Well, I mean, like I said, the stuff that I'm the most passionate about teaching is the leadership and the ritual facilitation stuff. And for me, ritual facilitation is kind of a subset of leadership. So I kind of put those together, but it's a specific type of leadership. There's lots of different facets to leadership. There's lots of different ways to be a leader. I tend to use the word leader in two ways. One is kind of the general way people look at the word leader is the person in charge of the group or the people in charge of the group. And that's certainly a proper use of the word. But I also tend to use the word leader for, you know, anybody who's stepping into making a thing happen, anybody who is volunteering, anybody who stays to scrub the dishes after the event. So, you know, these are all those are all leadership roles. And, you know, if you look at the church structure, you know, there's the minister or the pastor who gives a sermon. There's the administration folks. There's all sorts of different roles. And in the pagan community and the goddess and spiritual community, you know, often because our groups are so small, we end up having to take on a lot of those roles, and we often are doing things that we don't necessarily have skill at, and that tends to lead to burnout in our smaller communities. And so a lot of the skills I teach are just around basic group dynamics and communication, how to identify when the difference between you know, somebody who's just going through something and somebody who's really a problem person in the group, and it's not going to change. But I also teach skills in facilitation, because if you're trying to facilitate a meeting, if you're trying to facilitate a workshop, if you're trying to facilitate a ritual, those are all very similar skill sets, but they're different as well, and they have different requirements. And you know, what I often say is you know, God's blessed the people that go out to do those public rituals at pagan prides and serve their local community. But at the same time, I hear people within the kind of pagan and earth-centered community all the time saying, you know, I don't go to public rituals because they're so bad. And that's one of the challenges, is just, you know, we don't have leadership education where people can go and learn how to be a good public speaker. I had the tremendous advantage of going to Diana's Grove and also being involved with the reclaiming tradition, where there's just a lot of facilitation skills were taught by example, but also you know, taught through theory. I learned a lot of psychology, a lot of educational theory, all sorts of stuff that made me a better public speaker. And so that's a lot of what I try and do, is bring out, you know, if you want to go do this, if you want to go lead a ritual that actually inspires people, there's a way to do it. There's ways to do it depending upon your intention. And so for me, I mean, it's all part of community building. You know, to be a community builder, there's the spiritual leadership. You know, there's the education. There's somebody who's planning. You know, maybe you're going through. You know, a common one would be a year and a day program, or you know, any other kind of system. There's, you know, Druid groves might have a different educational structure, but you know, they're similar in the sense that you have a progression of material. And you know, if you're not trained to be a teacher, you might not know how to prepare those lessons in a way that people are actually going to get them. You know, learning how to facilitate rituals that actually engage people and make people want to be part of that group, you know, because they're effective. And you know, there's all sorts of skill sets within all of that. And you know, they're professional skill sets. They are professional skill sets that folks in bigger mainstream religions that have clergy, they have seminary to go learn how to be clergy. They get a lot of that training. And so my goal is to make more of that available, so that people, even if they, you know, they haven't been to a multi-year.
Okay, Chandra?
Yep.
Okay, all right. It froze on my machine for a moment there.
Yep.
Just trying to make my life difficult, you know. That's all.
Of following my heart and following sort of an inner inspiration around community. And I just want to be encouraging to people who do want to start their own communities. Shauna, your wisdom is right on. I think we need those structures, we need those professional skills. They're incredibly important. I think, moreover, though, we need to trust ourselves, and we need to be able to listen to the strength of our own inner voices and our own inner passion, and connect those two in and through our hearts out into the world, and be willing to fail, be willing to make mistakes, be willing to look bad, be willing to do all of those things in order to support the truth of who we are and the dream of having a collective of people gathered together to change the planet, change ourselves, change our communities, whatever it might be for us that has inspired us to think about forming community. And for me, I've let the process unfold rather organically, so that to a large degree, my own personal evolution has very much mirrored the evolution of the community, in the sense that I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. And certainly, to some degree, the people who are attracted to the community are attracted for those very lessons. And it's just a process of really being willing as a priestess to be very naked and very open and vulnerable before people that we don't really know, but being willing to do that in order to be of service. And I think that that's not at all how it may sound from the outside as maybe self-deprecating, or why would I want to do that as an empowered woman. But I think that to be truly empowered, we have to occupy that space of our vulnerability fully. And so a lot of what community building has meant to me is, yes, to put in structures and processes and all of the support that we need to grow as a community, but also to be able to be very much with the spiritual family as it's coming together and as it's growing and as it's forming and as it's evolving, so that all of that is true at the same time.
And I think it's also important to acknowledge that, you may not get all these skills from within your own community, but there are, at least in most larger towns, there is a tremendous amount of nonprofit organizations that are dedicated to supporting, or not nonprofit, but there's usually a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to supporting the growth of nonprofit organizations. And they teach how to create community and how to create, a bookkeeping that works, for one thing, or they create speakers, or bringing members. I mean, Chandra made the comment that she works in the nonprofit organization, in the nonprofit community, and I know that a lot of the skills and training that I received was through an organization that was actually set up by, I believe it was set up by the Red Cross, which trained other nonprofit organizations how to be nonprofit organizations, how to have a board, how to make that board more effective, how to work with your members. So reaching out to the other communities, one of the things I was raised in the Baptist tradition. My mother was First Baptist. She always made sure we understood that. And one of the things that I know is that the Baptist tradition, they really know how to get people to church on Sunday. You may not agree with them. You may not like what they believe in, but they know how to get people to come to church, and they know how to get people to stay involved with the community. And I'm not saying necessarily you should go to the Baptist church, but it's not bad to look at, for example, Reverend Rick Warren's organization, as to how he has created a church of over 15,000 people that has multiple small groups that meet. You don't have to agree with them to see how that organization can help you and help you to build your community. And I've been involved with the Centers for Spiritual Living for many years, and we are terrible at keeping people. We have an 18-month rotating door that people go in and out of, and we are absolutely awful at keeping people engaged. They come to us whenever they're, in a moment of crisis or spiritual thing, and then they get over it and they go on, because we don't keep them engaged. And I've been on the boards of a number of these churches, and one of the things I said is, let's look at what we do as opposed to what the Baptists do. And they, well, we don't want to proselytize. No, I don't want to proselytize, but I do want to keep our people engaged. Because if we don't keep our people engaged, we don't survive. And I think that whoever's community we are, we have to look at the point that if we have value, surviving as a community is our first responsibility. Because we can't do anything if we're not here. So that's my little lecture for the evening. But I'm very, very much this is something that is from my heart, and I really appreciate you ladies that are here tonight, and because you gave me an opportunity to discuss this. And there is an absolutely gorgeous little child. Who is that?
Yeah, do you want to join us and say hi?
Sure.
Say hi to everybody. And do you want to stay out of the picture?
Hello. Is that your daughter?
Oh. Yeah, it's my daughter.
Okay. So anyway, so as we're wrapping up here tonight, and I want to open it up and see if there's anyone we are getting towards the hour. And I try to keep these things on time so that people can, go on and do their other things that they are doing. What final words would you have of wisdom to people who are looking at how they can create community or create their lives as a priestess moving forward? And Shauna, I'm going to go to you first.
Well, I'll take what you're saying to mean specifically. You'd like to start a group or a community or get things going, or maybe you're already starting to do things in your local community and you want to build it stronger. The very best thing you can do is start networking, attend other people's events, find out what's going on. Witchbox is it's sometimes difficult because all the groups that ever existed get listed on Witchbox and nobody ever takes it down if the group falls apart or goes away. But that's a place to start. There's still the old pagan Yahoo groups. You can go on Yahoo groups and you can search on your local metro area or your local county name or your town name, and you can find pagans in your area. And usually, if you get pagans or specifically others, earth-centered spirituality, goddess, use all your different buzzwords for what you're looking for. You can start looking there. Facebook is sometimes a little more challenging to find groups, but you can. And usually it's a word of mouth thing still to this day. Even with the internet, it's often a word of mouth thing. But often if you can find a local festival, like Pagan Spirit Gathering, for instance, happens in Illinois, and that's like over 1,000 people, and there's people from all over the place. And often you can meet somebody there who knows somebody over here. I meet people all the time that are like, oh, there's no pagan community in Chicago, and I'm like, are you serious? There's a huge pagan community in Chicago. Let me tell you about all these groups that are out there. So I mean, just start networking to find other folks that are there, and if you want to start something, go ahead and start it. But also look at the things that you might need to learn to make that happen. And Chandra, I really resonate with what you said about that some of that service is being open and naked and vulnerable, and listening to your own deep wisdom. And I think that for me, that's kind of the deep, dark core of leadership work that, when I teach stuff like communication skills or group dynamics, usually by the end of the workshop, I'm starting to dig into, okay, so what are your personal shadows as a leader, and what where are you keeping yourself from going forward? And, I'm not here to teach you what your personal shadows are. I'm here to ask you questions, because that's each individual person's work. And so I really resonate with what you said about that. That's really the deep work of being a leader is, you have to look at what you do well and take an honest inventory of that, and you have to look at what you don't do so well. You know what I'm really terrible at? Accounting. I'm terrible at accounting. I'm really good at event organizing and, hey, let's do the big thing. Let's do a show in the barn and save the farm. That's what I'm good at. I'm not so good at keeping a regular group going. So look at what you do well and try and do that. Try and connect with other people. Find people you have a good fit with, and just keep going. And if it doesn't work out, okay, you learned something and you can try again. And if you ever have a leadership issue, like this thing's going on in my group, please feel free to message me on Facebook or find me on my Gmail, shaunaora@gmail.com, or on my website. Please, I love getting leadership questions, because at the very least I get an article topic out of it.
Well, you should have gotten an article topic out of this whole conversation this evening. I didn't know which rabbit hole we were going down tonight. So Chandra, what would you have to say?
Sure. I think I'll provide an additional perspective, and that is that we need to do our daily practice. We need to make a commitment to strengthening ourselves. We need to make a commitment to self-care and nurturance. We need to make a commitment to fortifying ourselves, deepening our understanding of ourselves to be able to do all of that work that we want to do in the world. If we don't have a daily practice, we don't have a way to do self-reflection, if we don't have those tools and those capacities or those times worked out in our day-to-day lives, we need to do that. So I stress to folks in my community, if you start with a commitment of 5 minutes a day of conscious self-reflection and do that for an extended period of time, you will see immediate benefits of that commitment and of that practice. And in addition to setting aside a specific time, and it could be anything from a walking meditation to a formal sitting meditation to even conscious play with a child. I mean, there are many different ways that we can do that. Gardening, quilting, whatever the craft might be, but to do with intentionality that we have a time for that deeper opening into ourselves, and do it with a sacred intention. It's called a sankalpa in Sanskrit. And we allow ourselves to set that intention and then deepen into that space to fortify whatever might rise up, much as we might look at our dreams as a field for learning, and if we're aware of the symbols of the dream, to incorporate that into what's on the burgeoning edge of our awareness and our consciousness at the moment, and take that back out into the world. We need a time for that processing and that reflection. So again, making the commitment to yourself in order to get stronger in who you are, in order to fortify that and building a community that you want to be.
I agree with you. I think if you aren't strong within yourself, you can't support others. And, we've all been in situations where people have elected themselves as leaders, and we quickly find that they have not got the capacity to sustain that. So I agree with that. So I wanted to open it up, and if anyone has any questions, there's a little hand icon that you can raise, or you can just type in a question. Siren says that, oh my God, she's gotten big. I presume she's talking about your daughter. If you have any questions, well, I'd love to entertain them. And if you have questions that you would like to ask at a later time, of course, we're always willing to entertain those as well. One of the things we want you to do is to continue to be in relationship with us here. One of the points of having the membership community is to have something where we can go forward. As I was emailing back and forth with Shauna today, my plans for going forward are to have classes that are available. And in fact, you will be getting a survey later tonight as to what kind of classes are you interested in taking, or are you interested in taking classes? And so that I can begin to craft what it is that we are going to be doing in the fall. My life is normally lived about 3 months in advance, so I'm planning what it is I'm going to do next. But if you have a question you'd like to ask, let's see, we have quite a few people here. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and either type them in or raise your hand, and if not, we're going to close this out for the evening because we are considerably after the hour at this point. I'll give you a minute. Looks like everybody is satisfied with what we're doing. That's nice. So I want to thank you both for being here. Chandra, particularly you, since it was like, oh my God, please, can you come on? Whenever I found out Normandy had double booked herself. Normandy's my dear friend, and she gets away with it. But I really appreciate you stepping up and saying, yes, I'm willing to be available. And Shauna, I know that you've been traveling, and we weren't exactly sure where you were. So thank you.
I didn't know where I was. So.
Thank you for being here as well. And if I would like you to just put on the recording now how people can get in touch with you. I'll also put it on the website as well. But Shauna, if you wanted to put you had an email you gave them that they could get in touch. And Chandra, you have a website that they can get into. Shauna has a website as well. It's very beautiful.
It just Shauna Ora Night, as in round table, ShaunaOraNight.com. You can find my contact info there, or you can find me on Facebook. Even if we're not Facebook friends, you can message me, so that works too.
Okay, and Chandra.
And I'm reachable via my website as well. It's www.sharanya.org, SHARANYA.org, and you can email me through any link on that website or chandra@sharanya.org.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And for me, I am on Facebook. I am down to 96 friends that I can have more. So if I'm running out, I don't know. I suppose I'm going to have to go through and edit it. But if you can follow me, and I also have a personal page on there as well. And we also have a Stepping Into Ourselves page. You can follow that as well. I always post on there. I look forward to knowing each and every one of you differently and hearing what you are doing with your community. Because, you know, we are the ones that are making the difference. We are the ones we've been waiting for. I know that's it's been used a lot, but truthfully, who's going to do it if we don't? So thank you tonight. And I want to tell you that coming next Monday, we are going to be incredibly blessed. We have Ruth Barrett, who is going to be with us, and she's also going to be doing a memorial session, I would call it, for Shekinah Mountain Water, who's no longer with us, but whose writings are in the book. And Marguerite Rigoloso is also going to be with us as a special guest. And both of those women are, well, three of those women are incredibly powerful, wonderful, and I have no idea what we're going to talk about. So come back and see and watch me, and you know, one of the aspects of this is seeing how I screw it up next time. But thank you very much, all of you, and thank you to the audience. May you be blessed.
Jai Ma. Thank you.
Thank you very much.